I'm going to show you how to improvise, that is, make up on the spot ambient piano music, even if you have minimal keyboard skills and no music theory. Yes, that sounds like a bit of a challenge, but let's see how we get on. Yes, this is obviously aimed at beginners, but I also think if you have some keyboard skills and a little bit of music theory, you will find some of the ideas, particularly those later on in the video, interesting and quite possibly useful. So I'm going to break this down into 5 sections. In the first section, we will discuss sounds. Now, yes, this is ambient piano. If you have an acoustic piano or want to use a piano sound, that is totally fine. But I suspect most people watching this will be using a MIDI controller and a DAW. And if you want one of them, then there are things you can do which I think will enhance your ambient sound. But pianos are fine. In the second part, I will explain the technique. It is very, very simple. And I know there will probably be some people who think, oh dear, but bear with me because there is more to it than just that. In part 3, I will explain why this technique, why this method works. And it's useful to know this, not only so you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, but this leads us on to point 4, in which we will enhance our improvisations to create even better sounds and music. Then in part 5, I will explain how you can make your improvisations sound more cohesive, how to make them sound as if they were actually composed, perhaps, rather than just improvised. That's a lot to get through, but if that sounds interesting, let's get over to the music machine and get started. So, ambient piano. Now you can use any piano at all. I am just using this one, the Grandeur by Native Instruments. It's quite an old sample library, but I think it's nice and it's a nice deep resonant sound. And you can see on my little keyboard here, I have the pedal, so we will be using the sustain pedal a lot. So now, because we are using a DAW, we are able to play more than one sound at once. So I suggest we layer this with strings or some sort of pad or vocal pad. And I am using, this is a Vital pad. It's pretty similar to the one which I used in my other ambient tutorials. Now it has a slow, very slow attack, which is what we want, and I've trimmed the release back a little bit. So what happens if we play both the Vital pad and the piano pad? Well, we get the piano sound immediately. We hit the keys, of course, because it's percussive. But if we hold down some keys, then the pad fades in. And I think that is an absolutely lovely ambient sound. I know it's really old and cliched, but it's cliched for a reason. So let's just add a little bit of sustain. So that's it. So you get the idea. So I'm going to use this, but of course, if you are using an acoustic piano, you can just use a piano sound. If you just want to use a piano sound with your DAW, that is totally fine. Everything's fine. So the choice is yours. But I think this combination is a really good combination for ambient sounds, and particularly if you have limited, shall we say, keyboard skills, it will help. Right, let's get on to the technique. And the technique is very simple, and I know people who know something about scales will say, oh yes, I know what he's doing, but just bear with me, because there are a few additional steps we can add, and which we will add, to make this an even better improvisation. So the technique is this, and it's very, very simple. All you are going to do is play the black notes. That's it. Yes, I know. Amazing. So let's just play some notes at random. I'm going to use the sustain pedal, because that's what it's for. So does that sound like relaxing ambient? I've no idea what I'm playing. I'm not looking at the keyboard. I'm just playing random black notes. Now there are many ways you could use this idea. You can just play chords, place your hands close together. Or you can play notes or chords. We'll come on to this in a second, but you can play a note to start with if your keyboard skills are still need a little bit of work. So you can play one or two notes in the left hand, say below. But this is middle key on this keyboard, I think. Not 100% sure, but it sounds like middle C, so we'll say it's middle C. So play one or two notes down here. And play a tune up in the above middle C in the right hand. Now I'll explain how to create nice tunes, or tunes which sort of hang together, in a moment. But for now, if you're just getting started, just play any black note in the left hand down here, and play any black note further up the keyboard, or play a few black notes further up the keyboard. So there's one note. So I'm just making this up. You can do exactly the same. What I would suggest is you sort of lean into it. You have to feel it. You don't want to play. Well, you could, but you know what I mean. It's a slow, relaxing, ambient piece. That's the vibe we're going for. But just play slow notes, play them in a relaxed style, and you'll be surprised, I think, at the nice melodic ambient results that you get. So that's stage one. The second stage would be to play more than one note at a time in the left hand. Now, there can be any two notes, really. I'm going to give you a little guideline about this, but you can play any two notes, because if they are, we'll say, more than one black note apart, it's going to sound good. And again, just play notes in the right hand. Now, I am going to explain why this works, and there's a very small amount of music theory here, but you can just take away the takeaway from this, and you don't have to bog yourself down with any music theory at all. It's actually not so much music theory, it's just the way our ears work and the way Western music works. You probably know that music is made up from notes. These are the notes, and each note is divided from its neighbour by a semitone, and there are 12 semitones in our Western scale. So after we've played 12, we hit a note which is the same as the lower note. These are an octave apart. Right, that's enough music theory. Now what we are trying to do with this ambient music piece is to produce something which is gentle, melodic and relaxing. We don't want dissonance, and the most dissonant interval in Western music is the semitone. So that's any two notes which are a semitone apart. Any two notes like that. Now there's a little, can we call it a rule or a guideline about these? Now if I play those two notes together, it does sound a little bit dissonant, but over the decades in the West we've become used to this sort of dissonant sound, and I don't think it sounds as dissonant as, well, it certainly does not sound as dissonant to us as it would sound to someone from medieval times. But we can separate these two notes a semitone apart. They are close together here, but if we move this note, the C, if we move this an octave down and then play the B, if we play those together, it still sounds a little bit dissonant, but not half as dissonant as that. So the way we perceive dissonance, or at least for this section of the tutorial anyway, this is determined by the note positions on the keyboard and also by context. So if we play a C down here and a B here, to me, there's hardly any dissonance there. If we go slightly more extreme, this could be any note. That really doesn't sound dissonant. So if you play one note down, lower down on the keyboard, and another note which would normally create a dissonance higher up on the keyboard, then it really doesn't sound as dissonant as all that. And there is also the topic of context. So if we play a chord, and you don't have to understand anything about chords, but this, I'll just tell you, this is the chord of C major, and then we add this B on top. Now I think that sounds lovely. So by adding some more notes, shall we say, to the potentially dissonant notes, we put it in a different context. So this chord, this is, for anyone who wants to know, this is a C major 7th. This is a major 7th chord. You don't have to remember that. But major 7th chords are used widely in in ambient music, in jazz, and in lo-fi music. All sorts of modern music. You would be amazed how many different types of music, pop music, hip-hop, use a major 7th chord. So that, I think, has totally lost any sense of dissonance. Now, if we take this one step further, we look at the second most dissonant interval, which will be, well, you can probably guess it's going to be a tone, a whole tone. That's one semitone, that's a whole tone. A whole tone is two semitones. So that is, if we aren't talking about semitones, then the tone is the second most dissonant interval we get in Western music. And the same rules apply, or guidelines. So there's a C and there's a D, an octave apart, and there's no dissonance there really. If we play a C lower down, then I think the dissonance just about disappears altogether. And if we go even further apart, it just fades into insignificance. But again, if we put a chord underneath that, C major chord, and play a D on top, I think that's another lovely sound. It's another sort of chord which is found in many, many types of popular music. So this is to explain why this idea of just playing the black notes works, because you will notice if you look at the black notes that no two black notes are a semitone apart, so we have absolutely no semitone dissonance here at all. And if you can play clusters, this would be this would be known as a note cluster. Just bang down a bunch of notes. That I don't think sounds particularly dissonant. Part of that's got to do with the sound which we're using. You probably wouldn't want to create an ambient piece with note clusters, but you probably could if you wanted to. So the most dissonant interval that we have using our black note technique is the whole tone, which, as we've discussed, is really not as dissonant as you may think. So you can play any two black notes together. And it really doesn't sound terribly dissonant. So the results you're going to get from playing all these, they're going to range from okay to fine to that sounds good, because it's all going to be pretty melodic. So there's one other little guideline which I'll mention, and this is to do with playing more than one note in the lower part of the keyboard. Now, just get back to our intervals, our semitone, our whole tone, and if we move up 3 semitones, this would be, that is really, really melodic. This interval, that would be technically known as a minor third, but this is really melodic. As soon as you get 2 notes, 3 semitones apart, this is going to sound pretty good. So in the left hand, if we play notes which are more than 3 semitones apart, that we are going to get a pretty nice sound. So just to go through it step by step, if we start with this note, then this is that's a tone, so the next one up would be this one, so we could play those 2 together, or those 2, or those 2. We start here, well, this is 3 semitones apart, so we could play those 2 and other notes above that. If we start with this one, then we probably wouldn't want to play that, but we could play that note and that note. And we come on to this one, we wouldn't want to play this, but we could play that or a higher note. And when we get to this note, then this is 3 semitones higher, so that sounds really good. So that's just something to bear in mind. It's a bit of a guideline. You can just play 2 notes close together down here, and that doesn't sound too bad. But this is it's a little rule of thumb. The lower down the keyboard you are playing notes, then the further apart the notes should be. So let's go for something a little extreme, perhaps. These 2 notes. So it's not, I don't think that they sound dissonant, but they sound muddy. And that's to do with the frequency, because they are low notes. So the rule of thumb is the lower down the keyboard you play the notes, and the further apart they should be. So if we play 2 notes higher up, here or here, there's a little bit of dissonance, as we've discussed, but they are not muddy. So this rule about spreading notes out in the lower part of the keyboard is to avoid muddiness rather than dissonance. Just helps the music sound more open if you spread notes out. So, knowing now what you know, you can attempt to play more than one note in the left hand. Just spread them out. and just play little, move up and down the keyboard in the right hand, playing little runs or little sequences of notes. Right, so hopefully that's given you something to think about and to work with, and something to play and enjoy. Now, yes, I know if you know anything about chords and scales and so on, you will say, but you're just playing the pentatonic scale. And that is absolutely true, because let's just get back to our white keys. This is a full major scale. Now, we're not going to count this because this is a duplicate of this note, so there are 7 notes in a major scale. And if we are just playing the black notes, well, there are only 5, which is where we get the term pentatonic. Pentatonic, that's 5 notes. And it has a very oriental feeling. It's a scale which is used in the Orient, that's got to be the most cliched Oriental riff ever. So when you're playing this, you might get the impression that yes, you're sort of improvising ambient music, but it does have very much have an Oriental flavour. Now, it doesn't have to. There are plenty of pieces of music written in a pentatonic scale, I think, which do not sound Oriental. So that is Promenade from Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition. You probably heard that, obviously played better than that with chords and orchestral versions and all sorts of stuff. But that's it written in the pentatonic scale, that section. I don't think that sounds Oriental. So it doesn't have to be. But there is one thing which we can do, one other note we can add to alleviate any feeling of Orientalness. And that is, yes, I'm afraid it does mean playing one white note. Well, at least one white note. Now, again, if you don't know anything about music theory or scales, you might be wondering, well, what white note do I play? Well, here's the thing. There are a few notes you could play. You could play one note or two notes, but we're not going to get too complicated. So at this stage, I'm only going to suggest you add one other note to the black notes, which you are already playing. So if we take a major scale, for example, that's a scale of C. Now, are there any major scales which contain all these 5 notes? Well, there are 2. One is a scale of B, and the other one is F sharp or G flat. So although we have only been playing with 5 notes, if we add another note, remembering there are 7 notes in a normal Western major scale, so if we add another note, then we are making up a 6-note scale, which will take away from the Orientalness, the pentatonicness of playing only the black notes. I would suggest adding B to your lineup. Now, you can try with the other notes. You could try with the C or the E or the F, but just for the time being, I'm going to suggest that we just add the B note. So again, just play the black notes in the left hand, but when you're playing notes randomly in the right hand, then add B in from time to time. Now, you will notice, of course, that the B, this is a B and this is a B flat, that these 2 notes, you are quite possibly likely to play these 2 notes at the same time, which may add a little frisson to the piece. But if they are separated as discussed, then I don't think it's going to sound terribly dissonant. So I think that sounds more Western, shall we say, than Oriental. So the note I'm suggesting you use is this. It's a B note, and it's the white note immediately to the right of the 3 black note clusters. Just be aware that there is a small potential for a little bit of dissonance. But if you're just starting and just want to experiment, then just play the black notes in the left hand. Now, if you don't have a lot of keyboard skills or aren't used to improvising or making up tunes, if you're going to try this method, you'll probably do pretty much what I've been doing, which is essentially just to play random notes in the right hand. So I'm not giving it a great deal of thought. In fact, I'm not giving it any thought at all. I'm just hitting notes at random. And, I think that sounds, fine. Anywhere from okay to fine occasionally. Some little sequences sound good. But if you want to give your ambient music a little bit more coherence, shall we say, so it hangs together a little bit better, there's a way we can do that as well. And that is to use motifs. Yes, that's a good music word. And again, it's not too difficult, and I'll show you how you can apply that to your ambient piano improvisations. So a motif is simply a short musical phrase, a building block, if you like. The most famous motif in Western music, I think, is this. Which I do believe you will recognise as the opener to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. And it's really simple, 4 notes. But what is genius about it is the way Beethoven handles it. And what he does is to extend and build on this motif in several ways. So the symphony starts off, and then it goes. So he's repeating the motif, only he's moving down a note. And then he repeats it again, only this time he moves up. You see what he's doing? He's moving the motif around, he's changing the timing slightly, he's moving it around the keyboard, and we can use the same idea to create our own little motifs and little melody fragments, which will make your improvisations hang together better. So here is an example. So a motif can be any number of notes. It could even be 2 notes, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 notes, something like that. Let's start with 3 notes. So let's create a 3-note motif, just moving down the keyboard. Like that, fine. Okay, so we'll just play random notes in the left hand. Now we can repeat this. We could just move down the keyboard and play the same idea again. Or we could move up the keyboard. Or we don't have to play them in a downward direction, we couldn't play them in an upward direction. And this repetition, because most music contains actually quite a lot of repetition or slightly varied repetition, so by repeating this 3-note motif, moving up and down the keyboard, we get a more coherent improvisation, more coherent tune, if you like. We're not actually trying to write a tune, not in this video at any rate. We're just trying to produce sounds and flowing music which sounds good. And rather than just bash random notes on the keyboard, if you play with little motifs like that, it will make the music hang together in a more coherent fashion. So that was 3 descending notes, and there wasn't any particular rhythm in there, but let's say we went so there's a little rhythm there, and the notes go down, up, and then down again. So we could repeat that in another part of the keyboard. And you don't have to keep to the same interval. That would work. That keeps the rhythm. That keeps the rhythm. That keeps the rhythm. These are all variations of that. So I'm just making this up, you can probably tell, on the spot. So that is a way to use motifs. So that's essentially it. Black notes with the addition of the B, and use motifs. To make your improvisations, your little mini tunes, hang together. There you go. So please do give this a try and let me know how you find it. Let me know what your skill level is. Let me know if you found it easy or difficult, or if you have any questions, and I will do my best to answer them in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, I have more videos about how to create and generate ambient music. I will leave links to them in the description. I know it's been a long video. If you're still with me, thank you so much for watching. I do hope you got something interesting and of value out of it. And if you did, maybe you would like to consider subscribing to the channel, clicking the bell. Thank you. And even clicking the big thumb is a massive help. So thank you very much indeed for doing that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you again in the next video.